Maybe that's fire.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first Octocon Presents of 2026. And our very first one is with one of this year's guests of honour, C.E. Murphy, Katie Murphy, and we're going to be talking about her latest novel, Bone and Blood. I'm Catherine. I am this year's chair of Octocon, and I'm very excited about it. So Katie is a writer of the fantastical in lots of different forms, urban fantasy, romantasy, lots and lots of different stuff, bit of sci-fi, bit of YA, and some really great cozy mysteries set in Ireland as well. And as I mentioned, she's one of this year's guests of honour, and it's about time too, because she's been coming to Octocon for probably as long as she's been in Ireland for, which is quite a bit now. So, Katie, we're here today to talk about your latest novel, Bone and Blood, which is a retelling of the fairy tale Snow White, Rose Red. And it's maybe one of the lesser known fairy tales because, I mean, it hasn't been a Disney movie. Personally, I'm really fond of it because I had a Ladybird book of it as a kid. And a lot of those Ladybird books of fairy tales were all blonde, blue-eyed princesses. So I was particularly liked Rose Red because, like me, she was dark-haired and brown-eyed and kind of enjoyed being a bit more active and outdoors. Although I've never actually met a bear in the woods, and I suspect that having grown up in Alaska, you might have, Katie.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, no surprise there. So we're going to start with reading, and then I have a load of questions. So over to you, Katie.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Catherine. I am going to be reading the just a little section from Bone and Blood where my twins, Snow White and Rose Red, who are named Chloe and Yara, meet the dwarf in the woods for the first time. If you do not know the fairy tale of Snow White and Rose Red, to summarize it, it goes something like this. Once upon a time, a widow woman had two delightful little girls who were the sweetest children who had ever existed. And one summer they met a bear in the woods. No, sorry, one winter they met a bear in the woods, and he came to their house and stayed there for the winter. And then the next summer they met a dwarf who was very mean to them several times, even though they were very nice to him. And then the dwarf knocked him dead, or then the dwarf was knocked dead, and the bear turned into a prince, and Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. That's really sort of, I had to expand that a little bit. So I'm going to read their first meeting of the dwarf. A little man stood at the heart of the wood's copse, his spine twisted, his shoulders hunched, his neck bent as he turned his gaze upward with a furious glare. His teeth were set, straining the jaw from which a long, scraggly beard erupted. His fingers, blunt and thick, were wrapped in battered gold, rings that matched those in his ears and the crooked crown that sat upon his head. More than that, though, living magic wove between his fingers and crawled up his arms and shoulders as if searching for something to cling to. What is he doing? Chloe hissed in Yara's ear. Yara shrugged an impatient, fascinated disavowal of knowledge, though she said, magic, in case it wasn't obvious. Chloe elbowed her. Yara flashed a pointy grin at her sister, and Chloe's eyes lit bright and green and giggly until they were both clinging to each other, muffling laughter in each other's shoulders. Chloe muttered magic into Yara's ear, knuckled her ribs, more painful than the elbow, and Yara punched her back. The embrace devolved into a wrestling fight, though Yara noted Chloe was careful to keep them from slipping even a toe into the circle of birches. A few seconds later, giggling and breathless, they sat up, detangling to eye the dwarf again. Nothing had changed. It was as if, within the birch circle, time only crawled, undisturbed by such things as girls giggling on its borders. Chloe elbowed Yara again, not so hard, and pointed upward. A green leaf hung suspended in the air far above the dwarf's head. As they watched, it slowly fluttered like the breeze playing with it wished to take its time. This was what was wrong with the forest, Chloe whispered. Whatever he's doing, he shouldn't be doing it. You've been fidgety about it for days, Yara whispered back, and Chloe spread her hands expansively, indicating the change in time before them. This is so slow, he could have started it days ago, though it's moving faster now. No, Yara said, watching intently. The magic is moving at the same rate it was. It's just everything else is slow. The tendrils that had been at the dwarf's shoulders when they arrived were now wrapped around his throat, although they seemed unable to attach anywhere. The dwarf's eyes bulged, frustration vivid within them, even in slow time. He was stomping one rattly booted foot, but the slow magic made it look like a leisurely step. Do you think he's a king? Yara asked. He's wearing a crown. He's wearing rags. Besides, Chloe added, there hasn't been a king since Arundalla's husband died, and that was over 100 years ago. The sisters fell silent, studying the furious man in the birch copse, and as one shook their heads. I don't think he's Arundalla's husband, Chloe concluded. The histories say he was gentle and kind and not suited for war. He looks like war would suit him just fine. And no one ever said her husband knew magic, Yara whispered back. It was Arundalla herself who dabbled in witchery. Can you imagine, Chloe said almost wistfully, can you imagine living when magic was real? I mean, besides us, she said at Yara's sideways look, besides the living forest and the beast that lives here, besides here where it lingers. That's why I want to go look for it, Yara said with a hint of impatience. But as she spoke, the tendrils of magic swept around the dwarf's face and spilled down his beard, tangling in it. Oh no, look, it's getting in his beard! Chloe crowded closer, her slim, familiar form a reassuring warmth against Yara's side. Yara wrapped her arm around her sister's ribs, huddling as they peered at the magic-laden dwarf. The magic looks like his beard, Chloe said. Not really, but they're both tendrils. Not solid like skin, I mean. So maybe it couldn't get into his skin. I wonder what he's trying to do. Oh, uh-oh. A pulse of silver as the birch bark, danced through the encroaching honey-colored magic. It moved much more swiftly now that it had a fingerhold in his beard, climbing upward as if determined to reach his face. That face contorted with anger and determination, and a power of his own surged, fighting the oncoming storm of magic. Color clashed, deep browns and purples from the dwarf effortlessly swallowed by the silver-tinted amber. Chloe sat up straighter, interested, but not obviously concerned. He's going to lose. It's going to eat him. Will that hurt the forest? Yara asked, alarmed. Her sister snorted. The forest is huge, and he's small. It'll be fine. But he won't be. Yara turned her gaze back to the struggling dwarf, then, on impulse, bolted forward into the copse and grabbed his beard. Cut it off! Yara! But Chloe charged in too, and with a slash of the knife she wore at her waist, cut the dwarf's beard free of the climbing magic. The dwarf dropped with a curse and a scream, thick fingers scrabbling at the soft moss as tendrils of magic, still clasping wisps of beard, slunk back into the undergrowth. What have you done? The dwarf shrieked, furious with dismay. Stupid girls, wretched roses, senseless geese! No part of me must be lost to the forest. And now it makes off with my beard. Yara sent a look toward Chloe, whose face went cool and inexpressive, always a sign of her deep, cold anger. Her hands flexed, a tiny action that served as a warning to those who could read it, as Yara could. He was a little old man, Yara thought. Chloe would make mincemeat of him. Her own anger, always hot and ready and brief, flashed bright as she put Chloe behind her, defending the dwarf as much as her sister. We saved you, you nasty man. You saved nothing. The wood cannot vanquish me in the way it has swallowed up the things that were mine, idiot child. Really, Yara said, her anger melting into dry sarcasm as she eyed where the dwarf's beard had disappeared into the moss. I think you're wrong. What were you doing, anyway? The dwarf's rage fled, a shiftiness coming into his eyes instead. A seat of rosewood, he muttered. It was mine once, before the forest devoured it. But it lies beneath the roots somewhere still, and with my very essence I called to it. I wound a spell of ancient power, of bone and blood and breath, and cast it deep into the forest's heart, seeking that which was once mine. Chloe edged forward and slipped her hand into Yara's, squeezing hard. The forest's heart is far from here. Aye, entangled with the beauty and the beast, the dwarf said with a curl of his lip. But the rosewood chair is still mine, and I would cut it from the bosom of the wood, no matter how deep a wound it makes. I don't think you were going to, Yara said, still dryly. I think the forest is stronger than you, old man, and you are going to be dragged down to nourish its roots. You should be thanking us, not screeching like an angry owl. I will thank you in my own time and my own way, the little man muttered, and when Yara blinked, he was gone again, nothing left to him but a faint smell of rot and fungus in the air. The end. Well, more like the middle, but you are mute.
I knew something was going to go wrong. I'm glad that's all it was. Thanks for that reading, Katie. That was fantastic. And when I got to that scene in the book, I got really excited because that's basically what's on the cover of my Ladybird book is the two girls and the dwarf with his beard trapped in a tree. And it was like, ooh, I'd sort of forgotten what happened in the fairy tale as well. I hadn't gone and looked up in advance what it was. So it was like, oh, wait, I remember this. Brilliant.
Amazing.
So that was really good. So I wanted to talk a bit about begin at the beginning. Not quite once upon a time, but very close, about how this book came to be. And I believe it started with the cover. Is that right?
It did start with the cover. The cover art for this book, which is utterly fantastic, was a pre-made cover by an artist named Raven, who I have worked with her before. I have some other covers of hers, but she had made it just for the fun of it. And I saw it, and in my heart, I knew that it wanted to be a retelling of Snow White and Rose Red. But I have 17 pre-made covers for stories I haven't written. So I said to myself, I cannot have this book. I cannot have this cover. Someone else will buy it, and someone else will do something wonderful with it. And then for months they didn't. And so finally I was like, okay, I will buy it because I know what to write for this story. And so that was how I ended up writing Snow White and Rose Red.
I mean, I know it's not the first time a pre-made cover has sparked a story for you.
Yes.
Practical Boots, and I
Yes.
believe Wintergate as well. And obviously in this case, it was very obvious to you what story you were going to associate
Mhm.
with this one. But for the other ones, what sparked, what makes a good, what triggers, what's good about a cover that triggers a story for you?
Um, I have a terrible problem with cover art triggering stories for me. I just the cover art for Practical Boots, uh I loved the title, and I loved it's this woman who's this sort of scrungy looking badass redhead with big practical boots and a gun. And I just thought, oh, I want to tell her. I love the idea of Practical Boots being the actual title for this story. The person who had pre-made it, Skylar Dawn Cameron, um, did not intend for a story to be titled Practical Boots. It was just that I looked at it and I said, oh, I want to work with that exact idea. And so I had a wonderful time writing the novella for that. And similarly with Wintergate, I knew wanted to do another fairy tale. And it's a retelling of the Snow Queen. It's a looser retelling than either My Beauty and the Beast story, Roses and Amber, or Bone and Blood, which is quite a statement because I've gone quite far afield with those two stories. But I didn't feel like I hewed quite as closely to the underlying story with Wintergate. But I love to look at something and have it inspire. Oh, I know what I could do with that. So yeah, that's how I end up doing these things.
I mean, as someone who's self-published a lot, including your recent re-releases of the Walker Paper series and Negotiator trilogy, you've put brand new cover designs on those,
Mm.
and that means you've got to have a lot of, or you've got to, you've you get to have a lot of input. You've got to have had a lot of input. My tenses are going all over the place. Basically, you got input into the covers yourself.
Yes.
So, what do you look for in a cover design?
Oh, that's a good question. Obviously, the first thing you want in any book cover is for it to catch attention and for it to make people pick up the book and buy it. A lot of authors badly want their, and I used to be like this too. They really, really want the book cover to exactly reflect a scene or the characters from within the book. And at some point, because I was a weird child, who paid attention to that kind of thing. At some point, fairly early on, I was still in my teens, I began to recognize that the point of the cover was not to exactly reflect the story, but to sell the vibe, the heart of it. And so what I have wanted to do is work with people who can find that for me, who can help me, develop that. And I've had my traditionally published covers have all been fantastic. I have had the luckiest run of any any author with just really fantastic cover art. But then when I'm doing the self-published things, I can get exactly what I want. And part of that is being able to explain what I want, to say, this is the thing that I'm looking for, and for it to um, be able to be translated into something visual. And so there's a lot of back and forth conversations creating that, but it's such a triumph when you get something that's you're like, oh my God, this is even better than I hoped for. So yeah, it's a huge, huge rush.
So, with your previous covers, again, because Walker Papers and Negotiated Trilogy were previously traditionally published, were you able to look at the covers they had, even though they were great, and go, "Oh, I'd like to do this differently." Joanne's head comes to mind. You might want to explain that one because that just sounds weird, but
So when the Walker Papers started coming out, when they were initially released, there was a big feeling in traditional publishing um, that readers would relate better to characters whose faces they couldn't see because it made them easier to insert themselves into the story. And I objected to that pretty consistently across my whole career, because as I ended up saying to one editor, yes, I understand that that's what your research indicates. My research indicates that women like women who have heads. Um, and I got heads on that series, in fact. So yeah, almost all of the Walker Papers you have Joanne from here down, on the original covers, or she's looking away from the screen, or from the viewer. And I wanted in the new covers, I wanted her to have a face. And one of the advantages, I mean, I actually had a photo shoot done for the new Walker Papers covers, so I have 1,500 or something images to draw from. It was we had it was so cool. It was so cool. The woman who uh became Joanne um came into the studio, and we had like 3 hours, and we just took pictures and pictures and pictures. I attended via Zoom because it was in May of 2020, I think. So nobody was going anywhere. Um and and it was just enormous fun. And so I have she can be consistent across the whole series, which was not the case with the original covers. And so being able to do that and have the same character, have the same person playing the character, has just been such a wonderful aspect to getting the rights to those books back. And it wasn't really something I'd thought about in terms of how cool it was going to be to actually have the same model on all the covers until it started happening. And then I was like, oh, this really is neat. So.
the Negotiated Trilogy, they're quite different again, aren't they? They were more, am I right in thinking they're more sort of stylized designs for
Yeah,
the new ones?
the again, when the series originally came out, the style for um urban fantasy covers was very people oriented. And so the original covers have my heroine, Margaret, on the covers. But now we have moved into a much more graphics oriented cover time period, with the Romantasy particularly leading the way in having lots of covers that don't have people on them. They have imagery, and so because the Negotiator trilogy is really, I mean, it was 15 years too early for the Romantasy boom, but it is Romantasy. It is romance with or it is fantasy with a strong romantic storyline. And so I wanted to lean into that. And the woman that I ended up working with, who is a Brazilian artist, I don't actually know how to pronounce her first name because I've never heard her say it out loud. Fakel, I don't know how it's pronounced. Fakel Barros, uh, just did the most amazing job on these new covers. It was so cool. We went back and forth several times getting details right on them, and they have turned into these just absolutely gorgeous pieces of work that I'm so thrilled with. So yeah, it's been a great adventure.
Got quite a lot of love for your the Shifters novels ones as well, the new designs with the, you know, like you said, the
Mhm.
stylized ones. I highly recommend everyone goes to katiemurphy.com and looks at the books page and just admires the range of covers, because there's such a lovely range of designs, styles, types. There's quite a lot of the people centered ones still on there, but
Yeah,
yeah,
there
there's
are.
which is they're not bad, they're good, you know. It's not they're bad, but just all the different range is really nice to have, but they're all you as well, which is really cool. And now I've forgotten what I was going to ask you next. I'm sure it was something else to do with covers, but we've talked quite a lot about covers.
That's all
I think we
right.
should probably we can keep talking about covers, but I think we should also talk about what's in them. Um, so kind of going back to the fairy tales.
Mhm.
So Bone and Blood is set in the same world as Roses in Amber, which is your Beauty
Yes.
and Beast inspired novel. I
Yes.
think Border Kingdom series is what you're calling it. Is that
Mm.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
And it's actually much more of a sequel than I expected, even though the focus is on different central characters. You can quite easily read it without having read Roses in Amber. And I don't think what you learn about the characters from Roses in Amber would spoil you then going to read Roses in Amber if you hadn't already. It's going to give you some really interesting hints. And I found the way you developed the characters from Roses, and just which was first person, so you kind of only got one view of Amber herself, especially, and to have other people's perceptions of her coming through in Bone and Blood, I found really, really interesting. I still haven't got to the question here. This is more of a comment than a question. So, was it when you started writing Bone and Blood? Was it obvious to you that since you're retelling another fairy tale, it had to be in the same world, or was that a decision you made as you were writing it?
It came to me during the brainstorming stage. This book took an enormous amount of brainstorming because the fairy tale is really pretty simplistic, and developing that into something that could be a book took a lot of thought, and angst and pulling my hair. And but no, in that particular case, I was doing the brainstorming, and I knew it was going to be in the same world, but I did not realize initially that it was going to work as a sequel, until there was a point at which that I suddenly went, "Oh, I know who my male character is." Basically, I don't want to spoil it, but I know who that is. Oh, okay. Oh, this is the sequel that I wanted to write, because there was a character in Roses that I wanted to tell their story at some point, and I realized as I was developing Bone and Blood that this was the opportunity to do that, to get that story on the page as well as my as the actual direct Snow White Rose Red story. So
Um, the audience couldn't see me when you were talking then about what made you suddenly go, "Oh, it's that," but I
oh.
was grinning from ear to ear because I was like, "Yep, yep, it does make absolute sense," and it's really nice through line.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, everything else fits in with it and brings so much more complexity to the story. It's like you said, it's a pretty thin one to start with. Um, I kind of want to talk about your Beauty and the Beast inspiration. I don't want to use the term obsession. The Negotiator trilogy, I believe, also owes quite a bit to Beauty and the Beast. Why that fairy tale in particular?
I love it. I mean, that's the very simplistic answer, but it has always been my favorite fairy tale, for as long as I can remember. I have a tremendous weakness for animal prince fairy tales, which very late in the game, it occurred to me that all of my shifter novels also kind of fall into animal prince fairy tales. I was like, I'm into this. No, I have always loved Beauty and the Beast. It is my favorite Disney movie. I was a screaming fangirl of the 1980s Ron Perlman, Linda Hamilton, Beauty and the Beast TV show. I loved Gargoyles, the animated series. I just really love Beauty and the Beast, and I had always wanted. I mean, the Negotiator trilogy is a Beauty and the Beast story, but I had always wanted to do a proper fairy tale version of Beauty and the Beast, and but there's so many good ones. There's so and Robin McKinley, she staked out that territory decades ago, and everybody who has written a Beauty and the Beast story since then owes something to Robin McKinley. And then Ursula Vernon had written an amazing one, probably under T. Kingfisher, I can't remember, but so I badly wanted to do it, but I couldn't think of a way in. And then I found that I had not read the earliest version, the earliest extant version of Beauty and the Beast. There was one that was 20 years older than the one that most people know, and it was much weirder. It was much weirder. There was much more Enchantress. It was much weirder. And I read it and I thought, oh, this is how I can do my version of this story. And so that was really a muse struck book that I wrote, and it's still one of my favorites. I really love that one. But yeah, I just love Beauty and the Beast. So
I was privileged to be one of the beta readers on that. I think it's the first book I've ever gotten acknowledgement for, which I was quite excited about. And I can feel the Robin McKinley in it, especially in the
mhm,
family dynamics and then the start of it.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
because I'm very familiar with her two Beauty and the Beast retellings, isn't it? Um, but not in a pastiche or, plagiarized way at
No,
all. It's
I'd like
just
to think of
the
it as an
threads are there, and I
homage.
can feel it. Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't even say it's that strong. It's just the nod, if
Mhm.
you like. And I definitely enjoy Rose and Amber again. I reread it this week to refresh myself, and I was like, oh yeah, this is as good as I remember it. And you've put so much extra depth into it, which a lot of Beauty and the Beast retellings just go for the straight surface level, like you said, the newest story that people know. And no matter how good those retellings are, I think having that little bit of extra backstory um, really works well. I've got loads more questions on fairy tales. I'm trying to figure out which one to go into the next. I think the thing is, some of the characters in Bone and Blood actually know they're in a fairy tale, and so does Amber in Rose and Amber. By at least halfway through the book, she's like,
Yes.
"Yeah, there's something going on here." It's you get that sense of almost inevitability that you get sometimes in a fairy tale, and where this thread of magic. These are things that happen because this is how they happen in these stories. And in fact, in your reading, you mentioned the girls being careful not to slip into the circle of birch trees, which felt very Irish, frankly. Uh, let's not go in the fairy ring. We're not going there. So how does the characters understanding that there's magic around and that they might be in a story, how does that affect how you write the story and the story for them?
I have a young adult fairy tale. I wrote one a long time ago. It's one of the few things I've written that isn't published, and hopefully someday it will be. But somebody asked me, an early reader asked me, who is telling this story? because it has 5 viewpoint characters and it moves between them. And I was like, the story is telling this story. The story knows what it is. And I feel like that is the space fairy tales live in. We, as readers, know how fairy tales work. Characters within fairy tales are rarely so divorced from the world that they would not themselves have fairy tales. Fairy tales are a very, very powerful part of our storytelling heritage. They go back. The animal prince stories. It's very cool, and I will not go into it forever. But linguists have tracked stories back to their oldest inception, and the animal prince stories are some of the oldest fairy tales that we have. So I really feel quite very strongly that characters in fairy tales, at least certainly the ones that I write, recognize that inevitability, that power that is working around them. My favorite line from Labyrinth is not "You have no power over me," but when Sarah is talking to Sir Didymus and he says, "Well, we'll go with you." And she says, "No, you can't do that. I have to do this alone." And he says, "But why?" And she says, "Because that's the way it is done." And he says, "Oh, well, if that is the way it is done, then that is how you must do it." And that to me is like the essence of a fairy tale. It is it is that the power of that by itself. This is how this story goes. And so finding the space inside of that to try to do something new, to try to plumb the depths of what might be there is is one of the things that I really love about retelling fairy tales. And I like to have my characters in them recognize that that is the way it is done. They understand that they are being pulled along by a sort of destiny that they might or might not be able to affect. And it makes me happy. Yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of the power of folklore, I guess.
Do you think there's scope in that for characters to actually push back about as to what they see, or maybe like this is the way set for me, but I'm pushing back against it? Um,
Well, I think so. I mean, I think that even my story doesn't end exactly the same way that the original fairy tale ends. I mean, the general strokes are there, but I think that even when whether we are story characters or whether we are regular people, even when we feel like we are stuck inside a situation that is not of our own making, there are still choices inside that we can make to affect maybe what goes along around us, but also who we become um, during that trial or whatever you want to call it. Um, and so that is both in Roses and Amber and in Beauty and in Bone and Blood. That is the characters are still trying to make choices of their own inside the inevitability, and how they make those choices um, changes how the story goes. And I think that that's a powerful tool.
I mean, I really enjoyed Chloe and Yara's sisterly relationship, especially because you see them grow up across the course of the
Mm.
book. That is not really a spoiler because,
No,
you kind
no,
of
it's
need them.
not.
You need them to. They start out being roses and then they grow into young women. Um, and the characters, those felt like a duality there where the characters were opposites, but there's a lot of complementary stuff as well. But it's not always in the way you'd expect from just a superficial reading of the original fairy tale, where Snow White, I think, was very quiet and liked to stay indoors and be bookish, and Rose Red was very outdoorsy and climb trees and stuff. So can you talk about how their personalities came to be in your story, and how you got them to mesh so well together?
Thank you. Part of it was I very specifically wanted to push back against Snow White being the quiet, bookish, indoorsy one, and Rose Red with her dark hair or her red hair, depending on what illustrations you had, being the fiery tempered, outgoing one. And so it took a lot of revision, honestly. It took a lot of going back and working through how I wanted to bring aspects out for each of those characters, because I, as a rule, tend to write somewhat feisty characters. Um, and I didn't want them to be the same person. I wanted them to have different ways of approaching things, and that that would work with each other, but could also work against each other. And it took I did have to go, because I found that I tended to make Rose Red, Yara, the feisty one. She was the fighter, the push, and I kept going, okay, I have to walk that back. I have to give her a different space here. And Yara and Chloe's ability to fight, is much more contained than um, than Rose's sort of explosive short-term temper. And I wanted her to be a contained character, but that's not the same as a quiet or retiring character. And so working with those two aspects until I felt I had it right it was actually quite a challenge. It was a lot of work to figure out how to balance those two together. So
I think it works, and the payoff at the end is extremely satisfying. It's one of those you can kind of like, oh, that makes absolute sense, and that is great, and that is a great, yeah. I can't go into it without spoilers, but the fact that they are effectively twins and tied, so they love each other very dearly. There is a lot of trauma. There is a lot of problems. Some of it is, yeah. But yeah, the payoff was, for me, was just like, oh, one of those that makes absolute sense, and that is, love it.
I'm really glad
um
to hear that. Thank you.
yeah, but some bits of Bone and Blood definitely lean kind of into the grim dark side of fairy tales, I'd say. Particularly their mother Adele's choice at the very start of the story, and how the mysterious and handsome Caspar treats one of the sisters. That was set my teeth on edge, and again was very well written, but yeah, in a
It
way
was
that
meant to
kind of,
set your teeth on
yes,
edge.
it was one of those creeping ones where it's like, oh yeah, sorry, again, trying to avoid spoilers here. Um, you'll know it when you see it, I hope. Um, but it's kind of, is the darker side of stuff something you'd like to lean into more in your writing, in say comparison to your cozy mysteries, which have lots of dead bodies but are essentially cozy mysteries?
I don't know that I have any deep and burning need to write lots of dark stuff. I think that fairy tales bring it out, because I think that fairy tales are about, I mean, fundamentally, that's what they're about, is they're about the frightening things in the woods. They are about the adventures we are forced to take rather than the ones that we choose to take. And so I feel like for me, making fairy tales just light and fluffy is not, I don't feel like it's being true to what I perceive as being the heart of fairy tales. But mostly, honestly, mostly I want to make people happy when I'm writing. I want people to be able to step into something that will give them some quiet and peace for a little while, something that will make them laugh, something that will fill their heart with happiness, because there is a lot of darkness going on already. And I don't really feel a compelling need to add a lot to that. So fairy tales are a big place for me to dip my toes into that, but it's probably not going to really come on strong in a lot of the rest of my writing.
And there's the hope always in fairy tales that the assumption that, you know, good is going to win in the end as
Right.
well. I think that that maybe ameliorates some of the nastier side of it. If you're not
Yeah,
just
you know
going
that
with,
you're
oh, here's
aiming.
a moral.
Yeah, you're aiming for happily ever after.
Hmm.
That's where we want to go with the fairy tale. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, certainly in Bone and Blood, you've managed to create a deep and complex story out of what is, let's face it, as you've said yourself, a very thin fairy tale. There's not a lot to it. I'm amazed we even got a full Ladybird book, to be completely honest. Um, what other fairy tale would you love to bring into the Border Kingdom stories? We've already got the Snow Queen you mentioned as well.
Oh, that's a good question. There's a there's one that nobody knows. It's called the Glass Mountain, which is I think it might be like Polish in origin, and I read it when I was a kid. I still have a copy of this big book of fairy tales, and it's a prince who has three tasks to accomplish, sort of thing, and one of the tasks that he's dealing with a witch in a glass mountain, and I've always really loved that story. Um, Basically any animal prince. I know I'm a
I
little.
was just about to ask, does the Prince in the Glass Mountain turn into an animal
He
at any
does. I
point?
don't think he does. I don't think he does. There's another one in it that's sort of a mix between um kind of, he's got a lion prince, and he's kind of a she could sort of somewhere between Rapunzel and Beauty and the Beast, kind of, and not Rapunzel, but Rumpelstiltskin, and I'm very fond of that one also. But uh, the the fairy tale ones seem to be things that I am struck with in the moment, that, oh, um, here is my idea. Here's what I can finally do with Beauty and the Beast. I've been wanting to do this for so long. Here's my, or, oh, here's a cover that I have to write a story for. And so they seem to be more inspiration of the moment than, oh, I'm going to plan to do this. And so yeah, that's how they're coming to me. So
Seems fair enough. We're heading towards the end of the time, so I've got
oh,
another
we are.
question for you, and
Okay.
then we'll do a bit of a wrap up. So you are a very prolific author with a very, very, very large backlist. And between you and Adrian Tchaikovsky, who's our other guest of honor this year, we've been joking in the Octocon team that we're going to need a bigger con.
Mhm.
So other than Bone and Blood, which of your books do you most want to tell everyone about right now?
Uh, mm,
All of
um,
them?
yeah, all of them, but there's like 80 of them, so we don't have time for that. Um, if you like fairy tales, I think that you should read my World Walker duology, which is Truth Seeker and Wayfinder, because I think of them as being a fairy tale. That's why. It's original fairy tale. It's not based in something else. But when I wrote them, that was what I wanted to do, was write a modern fairy tale. So if you were looking for fairy tales, I would suggest that trilogy or that duology. And then, of course, the old races are very much intended as a Beauty and the Beast story as well. So if you're looking for fairy tales, those are the things to look for in my work.
Excellent. I'm just going to give a quick shout out and calling back to the cover art for the Guildmaster Saga, which is your YA series, because the spines all line up and they're so beautiful, and you can see that if you look at the webpage with all of Katie's books on it. That was the one I was going to mention before and forgot, because there's always something that goes out of my head during these things. Um, okay, so we are going to wrap up. To remind you all, Katie is going to be our guest of honour at this year's Octocon, which is in Cork, Ireland, on the 3rd and 4th of October. And obviously, we'd love to see you all there in Cork. But if you can't make it to Cork, we also have a very strong online side to the convention, and we'll be streaming from Cork as well as having online only programme. We've also got our Discord running all year round, and lots of Octocon presents events like this, which do seem to be largely book launches this year. And we're having monthly hangouts on Zoom as well. And you can get your membership now at octocon.com. And if you are a member of Octocon this year, or you remember last year, you're invited to join me and Katie on Zoom right now, or in about 2 minutes, for a members only Q&A where you get to ask Katie the questions. You should have got a link in your email, or there's one on the Octocon Discord server if you're there. We're not making it public. Please put your Zoom name to your nickname or badge name so we know who you are. So it just remains then for me to thank our streaming producer Sakura, who's there in the background doing all the magic that makes this happen on the screen, and obviously my wonderful guest, CE Katie Murphy, and the rest of the Octocon team. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you at Octocon.
Yay.